over the course of the last 10 years, we've had a number of couples, fortunately not us, but a number of couples who have had issues with each other's hobbies, friends, sort of the things that made them an individual before the marriage. But darn it, now that we're married, we're one. And any hobbies my spouse has that are annoying, they ought to go. Now, if they have any hobbies that are beneficial to me, those hobbies should stay. But the other hobbies, and for sure those friends, that one friend that never liked me, well, they've got to go. And because now we're married and we're one.
Yeah.
So I stop being an individual and we start being a married couple, right?
Well, let's get into that.
Before we get into today's episode, just wanted to remind you that in the description of the video below, we put links to all of our social media accounts.
You can always reach us with questions or comments about this episode at marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com.
And finally, if you want to support us financially, there is a link to be able to do so at the end of each of the descriptions of our videos. Now, let's get back to the show. Hey everybody, I'm Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrea Warnock, and you've joined us for Marriage Monday on the Marriage by Design podcast. And this is a time where we get to talk to you about God's design for marriage, what the Bible has to say about that, and how we live that out practically.
That's right. So today, if you're watching on YouTube, you will notice that I am a huge fan of Christmas. I am wearing a Christmas jumpsuit top today, and yes, it is crushed velvet. Andrea is wearing a shirt that is the color of coal, like Scrooge.
I am not a
might
Scrooge.
Be wearing.
I'm not a Scrooge anymore about Christmas.
All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about hobbies.
Okay.
See what I did there? It's like Santa.
Thanks.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about what sort of our individualities, right? The stuff that we did when we were batching it up before we got married, whether those things have any place in our marriage or whether those things ought to be going away. We meet with a lot of couples over the years, praise the Lord, and a lot of them have dealt with this issue of, hey, he's got this thing he's doing, or he's got these friends he hangs out with, or she's got this hobby. No. Oh. She's got this hobby that she's into, or she's got these friends, and it's taking up time that could be spent just with the two of us, or he's taking time that could be spent doing these things that I want him to get done at home, or spending time with our kids, or whatever the case is. And Nathan and Andrea, I want you to sit him down and tell him to knock it off. Or I want you to sit her down and tell her to knock it off. And over the years, this has been a great opportunity for Andrea and I. Now, all my hobbies are very productive, so Andrea doesn't deal with any of these things.
None of them are productive.
And Andrea doesn't actually have any hobbies, so this is completely unrelatable to her. But
I might have hobbies if I didn't have 5 kids. My hobby is raising my kids.
And?
Keeping up with the house.
Specifically?
Vacuuming. Nathan says that my hobby is vacuuming. It's not my hobby. I think for something to be your hobby, it has to be something that you enjoy doing. I don't necessarily enjoy vacuuming. I like the result of it.
Right.
And it's just a requirement of trying to keep up with 7 people in a house.
Right. So the question is, and really this episode, Andrea, when we were prepping for this show, Andrea brought up a good point. And this is the case for all of the episodes on Marriage by Design. But for this one in particular, we want this episode to be a springboard by which you and your spouse, or you and your fiance, or you and your boyfriend or girlfriend launch into a conversation about individuality versus marriage. And what we mean by that is a conversation about your hobbies, a conversation about those things that make you, your friends, and have a conversation with how those things are playing out in your marriage. But when you have that conversation, you got to kill the inner defense attorney, right? I mean, this is not a good opportunity to get defensive when your spouse brings things up, because maybe you have a blind spot in your marriage, meaning maybe you have something you're doing that's really hurting your marriage, your relationship, and you just don't see it. And that doesn't mean it's not there, right? I mean, if I don't see a car in the blind spot of my car and I merge right into them, it doesn't really matter that I innocently didn't see them. I still hit them. So we want to be careful of those blind spots. And I find that this idea of hobbies and individuality can be a real blind spot in a lot of marriages.
Yes. I don't have anything else to say about that. Sorry.
So here's what we're talking about today. Really, we got 3 points. The first one is we want to talk about balance in all things. So we're going to start by talking about that. Then we're going to talk about counting the cost. And then we're going to talk about the gimme, right? What do the Berenstain Bears call it? The galloping greedy gimmies or something like that. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the galloping greedy gimmies
That's
last. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about today. So first of all, babe, any opening thoughts on, did I frame the topic okay?
Yep.
Okay. So, wow. So how are we going to open up on the balance issue? When we talk about balance in all things, what are we talking about there?
So when we've got hobbies or interests or whatever you want to call them, we have to be careful to be balanced with them when we're in a relationship. You know, if you're going to say, "Oh, well, I need to just not do these things that I enjoy because it takes away from time as us, takes away from me doing my responsibilities, fulfilling my responsibilities every day or whatever. It takes away from spending time with my kids, whatever that is. Like, I'm just going to, these things I love, I'm not going to do them anymore because now I'm married or now I'm an adult.
Right.
With a family or whatever that looks like.
Ooh. Yeah.
That's not the right stance to take because you are an individual. You have married somebody, you have married somebody who's not yourself, unless you're Dennis Rodman.
Oh, good Dennis Rodman joke.
And
nailed it. Look that up, millennials.
While you are one in marriage, you are a person has different interests. Maybe not many, but different interests than your spouse. Maybe you have a lot of things in common, but I'm sure there's some things that that don't overlap, and that's fine. And so to just say, "Oh, I'm gonna just not do those things anymore and try to just do the adult thing," isn't probably the right thing, because a lot of times what we see that ends up in is some bitterness,
right,
and regret and just missing out on, like, man, I really love these things and I'm just not able to do them. It's a part of who you are, and as long as they're wholesome things, that's a great thing. But also going the other side of, oh, I'm going to spend so much time doing these things because that's who I am, and I kind of leave behind my spouse and my family and my responsibilities, and I just do this thing a lot, is not great either. There has to be balance in the things that you love. And, we would hope that there's some overlapping. I mean, not we would hope. You need to find some overlapping interests and hobbies that you're doing together. And maybe you can come in on one of your spouses that you hadn't been into before, and now you're like, oh, yeah, that's all right. Or your spouse can come into some of yours and you can do some of that together. But there needs to be a balance.
Yeah. So talk about this idea of bitterness. Like what's the problem with being imbalanced? Because totally, and we've heard the couples that we sit down with that go, yeah, but you guys talk all the time about how the Bible says, and it does, that the two shall become one flesh. Mm-hmm. So is it right that my husband or wife wants to take trips with the girls, or wants to...
Did you say my husband or wife wants to take trips with the girls? No, husband should not be taking trips with the girls.
Yes, that my wife wants
Maybe
to take
I heard
trips with
that
the
wrong.
girls, or husband wants to take trips with his buddies, or, he thinks he can still go golfing every weekend like he used to before we were married, or she still thinks she can spend money shopping without talking to me about it, or whatever the case may be. Like, at what point do we go, well, yeah, but the two become one flesh, and everything should be going through him, and everything he does should be going through her?
Yeah, so there certainly needs to be some conversations and some agreement. That's probably the one flesh thing. You know, we're going to agree that this works for our marriage. This amount of time going hunting works for our marriage. This amount of spending going shopping works in our budget and for our marriage, you know?
Right.
But things where one spouse is saying, I think that's taking too much time or too much money or too much effort away from the other things that you need to be doing, then I think that divides the one flesh. And then when you're not one flesh, that's room for hurt, which can lead to unforgiveness if you choose not to deal with that, which then can lead to bitterness. And then that bitterness grows, and then you find that you're probably every time your spouse wants to do that hobby, you're mad about it.
Right.
Because and you just tack on another seed of bitterness to what's already there, because it's poking at something that's you're not one in.
Right. So, babe, I'll let you jump on this grenade. But I have found, and I'm being very cautious to use both male and female examples when I talk about examples. But would you agree that we have found this issue to be very one-sided when we have couples talk?
Yeah, it's not funny. Guys tend to be the ones who have more hobbies and more things that they're doing kind of without their spouse.
Right. So might there be a Genesis 3 reason why this becomes a prickly problem in marriage that might be worthy
Oh, what do you think?
Discussing a little bit. Might there be a control issue going on here a little bit?
Yeah. So that can definitely be a problem with it. As women, well, I will say though that guys tend to be the ones more often that have the hobbies.
Sure, and I'll address that in a minute because there is a reason for that.
My head was going down the side of like, okay, guys have more hobbies. I don't know what in Genesis 3 relates to that. Got it.
Yes.
So, it's a crazy thing, but Genesis 3 talks about that the wife will desire to rule over her husband. The wife's desire will be for her husband. Yep. Which is really, the wife will desire control, and that's not her place. Her place is not to be the head of the family. Her place is to be under her husband, and in a biblical marriage. And gosh darn it, I don't know. We just want to control. We want to mom people, and we want to. We think we know, and we do, but we think we know the best thing for.
Wait a minute.
I know how you should best spend your time, and when you should wake up, and what you should do with your hours, and what you should be accomplishing, and when you should go to bed, and how much sleep you should get. And if you would just follow my outline for your life, I would have a great life.
Right.
It's just this crazy thing that women just desire control.
Right.
And the closest person to us should be our spouse. And so, of course, we want to control them. And that includes in their hobbies. And so I think especially women need to be careful with their husband's interests and hobbies and that sort of thing. And really paying attention to, okay, is this really... Am I having a problem with this because I'm trying to control him, or am I having a problem with this because it's really coming in the way of our oneness?
Sure. Right. Right. And as for the other side, there is a reason why guys tend to have hobbies. And when you think about these hobbies, almost everything that we would consider to be a hobby falls into the conqueror category. I'm going to conquer remodeling this part of my home. I'm going to conquer the golf course. I'm going to conquer this video game. I'm going to conquer these board games. I'm going to conquer this side hustle that I think is going to make a lot of money. They tend to be achievement-based endeavors. And it's interesting, as much as we want to deny the Bible as a society, this is one amusement which the United States has taken to a level never before known on planet Earth. We have, in the process of doing that, confirmed Genesis 1 and 2, where men were created with the express desire and goal of conquering and subduing the earth. We have a conquering thing as guys. And again, are we stereotyping? Yes. Do no women on the planet like to conquer stuff? That's ridiculous. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there is a reason why men tend towards these hobbies. And look at part of it, guys, and we just have to be honest about this, and it's what makes us lazy in marriage. I've already conquered that. We're married. So, I don't, that's conquered. So now I have these hobbies that I'm like, look at, you're never conquering the golf course. I'm sorry. I've seen the very best play golf and they struggle with it. So you're not ever going to conquer that. Now, does that mean it's a wrongful thing? Well, no. But as we transition from balance in all things into counting the cost, I want to challenge you. Are you ever counting the cost of your hobbies? Right? We're really good at thinking about, okay, I want to buy this product. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Where's that fit into the budget? Is this really something that I'm going to want? And there are endless amounts of YouTube videos about tactics for spending your money better. Of course. Right? Put it back on the shelf and wait a week. And if you're still thinking about it, go buy, or whatever the thing is, right? There's a ton of them that are all boiling down to teaching us to think about the cost of things. And man, at this point in American society, as a husband and wife with 5 children, we're counting the cost of stuff like more than we ever have, because inflation and all the rest that's happening right now, it's expensive. And crazy. So, I don't know if we need to like give a child away to like as a door prize to somebody who's watching this video. I don't know, but we need to find some tactics. Right, we're counting the cost. Are you counting the cost of your hobbies? Because sometimes we get so focused on, man, I like this thing, or man, I like these people, or man, I love this place, or whatever the thing is. And when we're talking about hobbies here, we're talking about anything that is not a requirement for you to do, right? So, because when we talk here in a second about being me focused, we need to come back to that, because hobbies have a cost. Maybe it's time spent away from your spouse. Maybe it's time spent away from your kids. Maybe it's expensive, the hobby that you're doing, and there's a cost associated with that. You're taking money away from your family to do these things. Now, does that make them wrong? No. Those things alone don't make them wrong. My point is, are you considering those costs? Because so often I find people get into their hobbies, particularly ones that don't have a significant financial cost, and they just dive into them and aren't spending any time thinking about, well, I joined a golf club, so I can go golf as much as I want. It doesn't cost me any more than if I only went once. Well, that's fine, but when you're gone for 3 to 4 hours once a week or twice a week or 4 times a week, there's a time cost to that. Are you considering that? Are you asking your spouse, hey, this hobby, I know maybe it's not something you're into like as a thing, but the time I'm spending doing this, what do you see as the costs of that? You might be really surprised by what their answer is to that, because maybe there's a cost aspect to that you haven't even considered.
Yeah, and I would say that even for things that are good, if you really have a passion for service and you're taking a lot of time away to serve other people, that's a great thing, but there's a cost to that.
That's exactly right.
It comes at a cost.
That's exactly right.
Just because something's good doesn't mean it's right for you.
Yeah, same with ministry things.
That's a lot of what I'm thinking of, right? Yep. Yeah, it doesn't, just because it's good doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you, or that the amount of time that you're spending is right for your family.
That's right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Now, the other side of that, I would say, is there's also a cost to making it a hill you want to die on, that your spouse gets rid of whatever hobby they're into. Right? Either way, no matter how it is. If you're going to really make this a thing of like, hey, I think this hobby you're involved in is bad. I think these friends you have are bad. That hobby, those friends that need to beat it in our marriage. There's a cost to that too. And so, you really need to be thinking about the cost of the hobbies that we have or the hobbies that we deny.
Yeah, it's that sounds a lot like that control desire creeping back up. And really the cost that I'm asking my spouse to pay in not pursuing this hobby or these friends at all is this, asking, is this because I'm trying to control, or is this because this is actually detrimental?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, it could be, right, for example, you're really into golf as a hobby, but whenever you golf, you drink and you have a drinking problem, right? Or these friends that you hang out with, they're all divorced and they hate that you're the married guy or girl and are pretty... I mean, there are reasons as a spouse where it's reasonable to go, hey, I'm not trying to control you. I think this hobby leads you down a spiral that is devastating to you as a person and to our marriage or these friends or whatever, to where... But my point is, and I think you would agree with this, you're counting the cost of that ahead of time.
Totally.
Instead of just doing it because you're mad about the hobby or the friends or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, last point we want to talk about then is being me-focused versus spouse-focused. And I find this rears its ugly head in this particular topic in two ways. The first one is sort of the obvious one. I have this hobby I really love. I work hard. I deserve it. I raise the kids. I deserve to do this thing or hang out with these friends. I work hard at work. I deserve to do these things or hang out with these friends. I deserve, I get, I should, I have, I whatever. Right? Excuse me. So it's me focused. So the question that I have for you is, with your hobbies, how me focused are you being? Now I understand, it'd be reasonable for you to go, well, hobbies like as a thing are me focused. And I would agree with that. But I would also respond to that by saying God's given each of us different passions and things that we enjoy. And so there's
it's okay to have enjoyment in life.
Right. There's a difference between having things you enjoy and being honest about that and being selfish. Right. And in this case, I'm talking about the latter, right? Where you're disregarding your spouse's concerns or frustrations with regards to your hobbies because this is my thing and darn it, I'm going to do what I want. And that's what we need to be really cautious of. And I would redirect you back to, are you counting the costs with regards to these hobbies?
I think probably a good barometer of this is, are you, even though your spouse might not be in the right, are you willing to give this hobby up for the sake of your spouse?
Right.
Are you, even though their spouse may be trying to control you and not understanding your hobby, thinking that it's dumb, whatever, if it's becoming something that is a problem within your marriage, and maybe you would even say it's my spouse's problem, are you willing to give it up though for the sake of your marriage? And if you're not, that's probably an issue that you have with your hobby.
Yeah.
And an issue you have within your heart, because that would be, hey, I'm going to sacrifice for my spouse and do this for them for right now and have some further conversations, but to show them that I don't love this thing more than I love you. I'm not willing to pursue that more than I'm willing to pursue my marriage. I love you enough to give this up, and I'll give it up for a time, and we'll see, if we can have further conversation in the future.
Right. That's good. The other way that I find this comes up, and you jokingly did it earlier, people get really self-righteous about their spouse's hobbies. And what you said jokingly earlier was something about if your spouse needs to grow up. And I find that this is a thing where people are like, hey, this hobby my spouse has is just childish.
Yeah, Nathan has a couple of those.
Like, right. Like if the hobby was something worthy, then you'd be perfectly fine with your spouse spending all their time doing it, which of course is silly. This is a great example of where that the grass is greener always on the other side. And because there are plenty of spouses we've talked to who have spouses that do one of these quote unquote worthy hobbies, and
construction, clean up rentals,
houses, or whatever the thing is. And the feedback we got from them is, man, it'd be great if he just sat down with me and like played cards or played a game,
took interest in
any of these hobbies that are childish hobbies, right?
Excuse me.
Sorry for the coughing. Being as we've now moved into Christmas season means we've also moved into cold season. And in the Warnock house, cold season is from December until August. So
that's kind of true.
The question that I have for you is, are you being me focused with judging your spouse's hobbies or friends?
Yeah, which isn't to say you can't think they're silly.
Of course.
I think a few of Nathan's hobbies are silly. That's okay.
But not everyone can take care of orphans and widows the way that I do. So I understand that you
not
think
one of his
that's
hobbies.
silly.
But I do, and Nathan does this too for sure with the things that I'm interested in but don't do.
Vacuuming.
But we try to take an interest in each other's hobbies.
Right.
And there's hobbies Nathan has that I never would have thought to look into at all or spend any time understanding at all. But
Caring
I'm married
for the homeless.
Oh my gosh, that's not it. I never knew pretty much a darn thing about football, baseball before we were married, and now I know a lot about them, and
true.
Especially Nathan's teams. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying. I mean, it took me a lot of years to get to a point where I was like, oh, I should probably pay attention to this. But my point is, you don't have to be as interested in that thing that your spouse likes, but take an interest in it so you can have some conversation and there can be some overlap, in maybe you'll find that you like that thing too, or that you can get involved in that sometimes.
Right.
And you have some knowledge about that thing occasionally.
Right.
So that's anyway, something I think is really important.
It's great.
I don't know why I diverted into that, but anyway.
No, that's good. That's on point. Thanks for sharing that. So really that's, as you guys as a couple spend some time to talk about, hey, how's our individuality, which is important. I mean, I hope that's a takeaway from this episode, is having our own individual expressions of the way God made us is important, even in marriage.
Right.
But we need to be balanced in all of those things. We need to be counting the cost, and we need to make sure we're not falling into the trap of being outright selfish with the things that we want to do at the expense of our spouse.
Yeah, where are your priorities really?
That's right. And if you're doing those three things, having balance in everything, counting the cost, making sure to be selfless, even when you think about your hobbies or your spouse's hobbies or friends, then you can have this conversation. And even though you might disagree on the value of what each other's individually interested in, you can come to a place where you appreciate the way that God made your spouse versus the way that God made you, and how they round you out as a person, and begin to appreciate that, hey, they might actually expose me to some things I would never know anything about if I hadn't gotten involved with this person.
Yeah, and you want to be married to somebody who enjoys their life.
That's right.
And they're the things your spouse doing the things that they enjoy is good for them as a person.
Right.
And so being happy for them to do those things is really a blessing to your spouse, and kind of overflows onto you because they're just enjoying life makes for a happier person.
That's right. That's right. Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us. So appreciate you being here. Love to have you give us some feedback on how these conversations have gone with your spouse. Leave that in the comments below or pop over to our Facebook page and leave them in the dedicated post there on the page. Until then, guys, we'll be back at you next Monday. Enjoy your week, and remember, God is for your marriage.